In the small, desolate town of Whitley, shadows seemed to cling more tightly than anywhere else. The locals whispered of a man who roamed the outskirts, a very dark man, said to be both a curse and a spectre of a past too sinister to speak aloud. Ellie Harper had lived in Whitley her whole life, and though she was skeptical of local superstitions, something about the tales unsettled her. Tonight, she would test the legend. With her curiosity piqued and her nerves steeled, she set out on foot towards the forest edge, where the dark man was said to linger. The forest was a vast, ancient entity, its twisted trees and gnarled branches casting monstrous shapes under the moonlight. Ellie's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating only a few feet at a time. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made her heart race. She had heard the stories, how the very dark man appeared as a silhouette against the night, his presence so palpable it seemed to suck the light from the world around him. Many claimed he was the ghost of a man who had vanished decades ago, but no one knew for sure. Some said he was a shadowy figure who drew the unwary into his realm, never to be seen again. As Ellie walked deeper into the forest, the air grew colder. She clutched her flashlight tighter, the beam trembling with her hands. Then, a sudden chill ran down her spine. A dark shape moved just beyond the edge of her light. She stopped, straining to see through the dense darkness. The shape was too indistinct to make out, but undeniably there. "Hello!" Her voice cracked, barely a whisper against the forest's deep silence. There was no answer, only an oppressive quiet that seemed to grow heavier. Ellie took a deep breath, forcing herself to move forward. The stories she'd heard were absurd, right? Just tales spun by frightened townsfolk. But then she saw it, an old, crumbling cabin, hidden among the trees. Its wooden walls were covered in rot, and its windows were dark, hollow eyes that seemed to stare back at her. The door creaked open as she approached, as if beckoning her inside. Against her better judgment, Ellie stepped in. The interior was just as decrepit as the exterior, with dust-covered furniture and cobwebs in every corner. A single candle on a wooden table flickered, casting eerie shadows. Ellie's breath fogged the cold air as she moved to investigate, her flashlight revealing faded photographs on the walls, faces long forgotten, eyes following her with a disturbing intensity. Her gaze was drawn to a peculiar sight, a mirror, cracked and grimy, hanging on the wall. As she moved closer, Ellie noticed something unsettling. The reflection in the mirror wasn't her own. Instead, it showed a dark figure standing just behind her, the very dark man of legend. She spun around, but the room was empty, save for the rotting furniture. Panic gripped her, and she rushed towards the exit. But as she reached the door, it slammed shut with a deafening bang. Ellie whirled around, her flashlight flickering wildly. The candle on the table had gone out, leaving the room bathed in an oppressive darkness. From the corners of the room, a figure emerged, a tall, slender man cloaked in shadow, his features indistinguishable but his presence palpable. The very dark man was real, and he was closing in. Ellie's breaths came in ragged gasps as she backed away, her flashlight failing her. The darkness seemed to consume the very light, rendering her helpless. "Why are you here?" A voice, low and resonant, filled the room. It was neither a whisper nor a growl, but a deep, unsettling tone that seemed to echo from everywhere at once. "You've come to see the truth, but truth is not always kind." Ellie's heart pounded in her chest. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude," she stammered, her voice barely audible. The very dark man's silhouette seemed to flicker in and out of existence, a shadowy anomaly in the night. "It is too late for apologies," he intoned. "Those who seek to unveil the darkness often become part of it." As he spoke, Ellie noticed that the photographs on the wall began to move. The faces in the pictures twisted in agony, their eyes pleading for release. The dark man extended a hand, not in invitation, but in assertion. He was pulling her into his realm, a realm where shadows were alive and time stood still. Ellie turned, desperately searching for an escape. She found a small window, barely large enough for her to squeeze through. With trembling hands, she tried to force it open, but the dark man's presence was overpowering. Shadows coiled around her, drawing her closer to him. In a final, desperate effort, Ellie grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it at the window. The glass shattered, and she scrambled through the opening, her body scraped by the jagged edges. She fell onto the forest floor, panting and bruised, but free. She ran through the woods, not daring to look back. The night seemed endless, the darkness pressing in on all sides. When she finally stumbled back to the town, breathless and shaking, dawn was breaking. The first light of morning had a strange comfort, but the memory of the dark man's gaze haunted her. Years later, Ellie would tell her story to anyone who would listen. She would speak of the very dark man and the shadowy realm he inhabited, warning others to stay away from the forest's edge. But in Whitley, some stories never die, and as long as people whispered of the very dark man, the shadows of the forest remained ever watchful, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close.